y'all so much for joining us, everybody out there listening and watching and hanging out here. This crew right here. So what we're doing this evening is called the Co-Collective Creative, and that is just something ripped straight out of the pages of a Neil Donald Walsh book, and it's something I'm a big fan of, that context. And so here we are. The topic this evening is contact. Now that seems pretty simple and straightforward, but as you're going to hear with our panel this evening, it is not. And that's why, again, the most amazing minds in the multiverse are here to talk about this. So if you guys don't mind, we'll run around the room, and I want you guys to just introduce yourself, just say something about yourself to the audience, and also let me know, what does the word contact mean for you? So if you don't mind, we will start with Denise Stoner. Denise, it's so good to see you. How are you?
Hi, my name is Denise Stoner, and I have been researching both the paranormal and contact. And what does that mean to me? That means that I have met up with both spiritual beings and entities from other places. I don't always know or can say where they're from, but that's what I think of it.
Very cool. And wonderful book that you did write with Kathleen Marden, and very cool, guys. All the ways to find everyone, by the way, is going to be linked down in the show notes. So for sure, we're going to make sure that everybody knows how to find you after this as well. And on that note, we'll just segue right into Kathleen Marden. Good to see you.
Hello, great to be with you this evening. And a little bit about my background. It's in social work, education, social science. Have bachelor's degree and master's. I couldn't finish the master's because of illness, but got pretty far along on that. I'm the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, and I have, my gosh, since 1961 been aware of the presence of UFOs, and then a little while after that, contact. I've been working pretty much full time in this field for 32 years. I've written 6 books, 1 with Denise and 3 with Stanton Friedman. And now I'm a speaker, an author, and on-camera expert. And that's about it. What does contact mean to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Gosh, well, it could have many meanings. When I think of contact, I think of, in terms of extraterrestrials, contact with non-humans, contact with an advanced civilization from another world.
Interesting. Yeah, and that's what we're here to talk about, guys. It is such a broad topic. It really goes deep. So Pamela, Nance, it's good to see you. How are you?
I'm good, Brandon. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. So for me, my experiences range from paranormal to extraterrestrial, and they began as a young child around the age of 4. And have continued throughout my life with an out-of-body experience, a near-death experience, seeing craft in the sky, and actually having several encounters with off-planet beings. And so having experienced all of this high strangeness for basically my entire life, it put me on a path of exploration into the study of consciousness and various forms through paranormal contact, extraterrestrial contact, but also gave me a real desire to learn about history and the origins of humankind. And so I obtained a master's degree in anthropology and archaeology, and minor degrees in sociology and religion, and just trying to understand from a scholastic viewpoint what happened in our distant past, and just in an effort also to gain an understanding of the archaeological record and how we fit as humans into the history of our planet. And I also had a 30-year career at a leading medical university in clinical trial research in areas of public health and biostatistical sciences. So that gave me a really good research background to pursue my interest in consciousness. And I guess for me, contact would entail the flow of consciousness, how it's come to me and through me through various experiences, not just one experience or one genre, but across genres or disciplines or however you want to term it. So
Yeah,
it's pretty much a lifelong pursuit.
it's fascinating. And you guys definitely check out her website. It's going to be linked in the show description. It has some of the most incredible research that you're missing time where your voices overlap. I'm not going to ruin it, but it's fascinating. So let's keep it going here with Dr. Irena Scott. Just had Philip Mansell on when we were talking about his new book, UFO Landings UK. Flying Disc Press, you're in that family, as well as Ryan there. And so we were talking about the Beyond Pascagoula and how there's so much more to that case. And so it was really interesting. And so it's great to see you. How are you?
Thank you for having me. Yes, Pascagoula is interesting. It happened in 1973. And due to his effort and a lot of others, we're finding a vast amount of information about it still. And so it's pretty amazing. You can go back in history and get it. My name's Irena Scott, and as I said, thank you for having me. And I've always been in science and retired in a scientific position. And so I was in the UFO closet for many, many, many years. But I sort of experienced UFOs when I was a very young child too, and later in different times. And then finally, when I retired, I sort of got into the field. And contact to me means, I think it means physical contact, but it also could mean quantum mechanics type contact too.
That's one of the things. It goes deep. It certainly does. Mark Gober, it's so good to see you. How are you, brother?
Brandon, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me back. And it's nice to meet everyone here. My background is in business. I used to work in investment banking in New York and then spent nearly a decade in Silicon Valley advising tech companies. So very different than the world of contact. But about 6 years ago, I had what I might call an intellectual awakening. I came across research related to the science of consciousness. And I went from a total nihilist to realizing there's more to life. So I've been on a nearly 6-year journey since then. In short, and have written 4 books, the 4th of which is coming out this month, called An End to Upside Down Contact, which is going to be talking about, Brandon's got the other books up.
I have the other ones there.
But it looks at human contact with other intelligences. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. In terms of how I define contact, it's really, as I just said, it's communication with other intelligences, and that could be in a physical manner, but it also could be in a multidimensional manner, or also in the realm of consciousness in ways that are probably difficult to describe.
Yeah, 100%. I've experienced some psychedelic experiences that would fit exactly into the category that you just talked about. So it's interesting. It goes really, really far. So Ryan Musgrave Evans. Oh, my bad.
One quick, I should add that I'm not an experiencer, at least that I'm consciously aware of. So I've been kind of a third party observer and researcher.
Yeah, same. You and I share this. I think third party is the reason that we haven't made contact. I kind of have a theory on that. Or if we have, they don't let us remember it, which there's a whole deep world in that as well. It's just amazing. So I'm right there with you, non-experiencer myself, but I love these people and love y'all's experience. And thank y'all so much for sharing it and your wisdom and insight on this. It's just incredible. Ryan Musgrave Evans, dude, good to see you, man. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Thanks for having me. I'm very humbled to be here. This is an excellent lineup of dudes, that's for sure.
Why you're here.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there's my book. Thanks, Brandon. Yeah, so I'm an experiencer, have been all my life, sporadically over my life. Lots of different, otherwise disparate kinds of phenomena. Poltergeist activity, shadow people, more typical close encounter, ET kind of phenomena would normally be categorized of. But what's happened in the last 10 years is that contact has really ramped up. The beings are allowing me to remember a lot more. And I now understand that they are the underlying cause of all those phenomena in my life. Manifested in different ways depending on what kind of technologies they're using at the time. They call themselves the Mudjana. They are a flesh and blood race that I consider to be cryptoterrestrials due to them being indigenous to this earth, closely genetically affiliated with us. And so I wrote that book there as an investigation into their presence. So I don't talk about my own experiences till the end of it. I try to remain as objective as possible and go through, inspired by Jacques Vallée and also Mac Tony's, seek examples of cases of the beings that I know so well throughout folklore and superstitions in older times, all the way up to modern times, and the modern cases of Charles Hall and Chris Bledsoe and myself and Carly Cale, Peter Curry in Australia, and try to demonstrate by building a profile that I call the CT profile, that these are largely one race of beings that are interacting with different people that I list through the book. But yeah, I'm just really happy to be here. I'm writing another book now that'll be published early next year. I am a Philip Mantle Goblin, along with Irene. Yeah, Philip Mantle is such a great bloke. He really goes above and beyond for his authors. And I'm just happy to be here, dudes. But I'm rambling, so I'll leave it there.
It's cool, and I hope that you can share some of your stories this evening. For all the everybody here this evening that doesn't know Brian, he is fascinating, and his cases, his perspective, his interactions will blow your mind. Some of the creepiest stories I've ever heard, by the way, on my show. It gave me the goosebumps like so many times, and I hope that you could share some of those tonight with us, buddy. And lastly, but of course not leastly, Jim Penniston. Jim, how are you, dude?
I'm doing great. Well, my name's Jim Penniston.
Up here,
United States Air Force retired. And I am one of the few people, I think the only one on this panel that conducted an Air Force investigation of a craft unknown origin. So, and you don't care about my academics. You don't care about my books. I don't care about them either. Let's get into the conversation, okay?
Well, what's contact to you, and then we'll move into it.
Contact is communications. I go along with Mark, actually. Exactly what Mark is saying.
Okay.
Yeah, same here, by the way.
Well, perfect. So let's talk about the different types of contact then. We've obviously got a few different varieties here. So we're talking about contact of the third kind. So this is usually in Hynek's scales, and more were added to this, of course, but in his 1972 book, this is what he delineated. So we're just kind of wrap on this for just a little bit. So the third kind is about 500 feet out, so you can make out details and things like that. Anything beyond that, even normal people would say an airplane, if it doesn't have lights or if it's not in the right way, it's easy to get confused. Anything 500 feet in is kind of the standard on this, which that's just what it is. So let's talk about those cases. So that is still considered contact. The CE5 groups that go out and they will or meditate in UFOs, and they can see things, but none that we have heard of had landed, and so this has all been third kind or a little bit further than that, because they do things with lasers and all that kind of stuff. So what do you guys think is going on with the CE5 groups? Are they contacting UFOs, and why don't they come any closer in y'all's opinion? Mark, have you looked at this at all?
I've heard about it a bit, and as you're talking, Brandon, I'm thinking about contact not just from the UFO perspective, even though that's part of it, but also from just the realm of consciousness. So like a near-death experience, for example, people encounter other beings, and there's a big spectrum. Often they're benevolent, like beings of light or deceased relatives, but in a small percentage, they encounter demonic beings. So that's a bit different than what you're describing of trying to like summon in a craft effectively, which I have heard about as well. But I see it as a spectrum of essentially types of beings, probably different species that interact in different ways.
That's what's so interesting is the variety, right? And how it's changed over time. So Pam, what do you think about the CE5 groups? And because they say that they make mental telepathy kind of contact with these UFOs, and that's how they're able to bring them in. Stephen Greer's work of vectoring in, and you basically are remote viewing a UFO that then comes in, and that sounds a ton like what Mark's talking about consciousness. What are your thoughts on it?
Right. I have experienced some of that firsthand, and it happened in a group setting, and we were all very intent in our thoughts and focus on communicating with the, whatever was out there, trying to call in orbs or light beings. And I find my experience showed me was that in this group setting with enough intention and focus, something happens. I don't know if, it's almost like magic. If this energy that's out there, that's all around us, that maybe remains unseen for most of the time, if we target our consciousness and our intention towards this energy, does that give it the energy to manifest? Is it a two-way street? Are we feeding it, or is it feeding us, or is it a combination of both? Energy coming and going. It's almost mediumistic in a way, this focused intention. So I know that there are people who are very successful in manifesting these objects. So I'd like to, see more reports and read more firsthand information. I just know what I've experienced and a few YouTube videos that I've watched. And Chris Bledsoe has sent me numerous clips, that he's been able to sort of call in on his property.
That's so funny you mentioned Chris. We met on a panel show the other evening, and now we're in communication. I'm going to have him over, so it's so interesting that you said that. And it is interesting also, this tie to consciousness, because this is one of the interesting things, right? At what level is this separation, if there is any at all? Because what's also interesting is whenever you're looking out at these people who are zooming in these UFOs with lasers, they're just out there. They don't come in. You can't really formulate or identify a craft, a metal object of any kind. It's just a light that seems to make sort of erratic movements that they can separate somehow from a satellite or anything else. So it could be anything, right? It could be a sprite. It could be, some sort of non-physical orb or something connected to consciousness that they seem to be connecting with. I was just curious about why no one has brought down a physical craft, which makes me think that they're not connecting with physical craft. They're doing... It's something else, maybe saying that it is, but staying out of view so that you just have to kind of take its word for it, if that makes sense. This is kind of the gray area of this stuff. So, Dr. Scott, have you ever been a part of a CE5 group?
No.
No? Do you want to go? I know somebody down the road. He's got a big bunch of lasers, and we'll just go shine them in the sky and hang out.
I don't know.
All right. It's an open invite, okay? But what are your thoughts on it? Have you heard of people doing this, connecting with UFOs mentally? And I know a guy named Peter Whitley. He's the international director of MUFON in Japan, and he astral travels onto UFOs, and it's fascinating. So what are your thoughts on that, the contact that we can mentally have with these things allegedly floating around up there?
Well, I think it's probably mental, and I don't know anything about whether it's really UFOs or something else. But I think it's something that can put images in your mind, but you may not be able to see them, or they put the images of whatever they want you to see in. So they may be showing you all kinds of aliens and spaceships and everything else, but they may not be real.
Yeah, I have thought of this too, that it's all like Jinn, and they just shapeshift, and they do Skinwalker. They just do whatever they want, shapeshift into anything because of the wide variety of this. And I might be jumping ahead. This is late conversation stuff, but Kathleen, Marden, what do you think about the CE5 contact group, those activities?
Well, this goes all the way back to 1965 when my Aunt Betty Hill was working with a team of scientists attempting to call in craft. She was pretty successful. They called it psychophysics experiments in those days. And there were craft that were coming in close and landing in my neighborhood and near the town that I lived in. And in April of 1965, one did land across the street from me on my grandparents' farm. And it was observed by two different people. It left physical trace evidence on the ground, and it took my mother and I onto the craft. We weren't there wanting to go on. We were in bed at the time, sleeping, but we both remembered part of what occurred. So more recently, I've been in a couple of CE5 experiments with Denise and Kevin Briggs and others. And sometimes craft comes in, not enough to satisfy me, just sort of lights in the sky, which I'm really not that interested in.
Yeah, that's how I feel. And this is, I was wondering if you guys, having been a part of it, probably were like, okay, where's the rest of it? You know, do we get to call an actual craft down? Denise, did you ever ask that? Did somebody say, okay, like that's cool, but can we, bring it in?
Yeah, I think it's important that we continue to try and to work on this research, because one of the things that I think Kathy would agree on is that when we were working indoors with someone, when we were working with Kevin Briggs, when we brought people who were severe skeptics and negative about any of this coming to fruition, we didn't have the positive reaction that we were looking for. So I'm beginning to think that if you have the negative factor there, the skeptic there, it's not going to happen as often as it would if you had a group of positives.
Kathleen and I were talking about this. Kathleen, I refer to this all the time on the show, our conversation about two people standing there. It seems to be connected with vibration or frequency or your vibe, your mojo. And two people can be standing there. One person sees it, one person does not. And it's this type of experience, how it's selective. That's what's also interesting about this, because super high vibe people then never see UFOs. I'm, as one of the most high vibe people you ever meet, never seen one that I know of, So what am I one tick below my vibration? I'm already Tigger bouncing around here most of the time. Just show me a UFO.
Well, I don't think it has a lot to do with your physical or emotional energy. Yeah. It's more with your vibrational frequency.
Right.
And the ETs say that if you can raise your vibrational frequency high enough, then you will be closer to their dimension. So they say that those of us who have had our frequency elevated are able to observe things, see things that people of lower vibrational frequencies cannot see.
It's very interesting how this all works. Jim Penniston, you must have been just flying high vibe more than ever, because you have one of the craziest contact stories ever.
Yeah, this is a really strange subject. Okay. This whole thing about what you're talking about the C5. Okay. But it ties into, I hate to bring this up, about a meeting I had with, the CIA and a CIA analyst, and actually it ties into what Irene was saying. And it is actually, it's part of, according to them, this is not me talking, okay? First of all, I don't think C5 groups can bring nothing in, okay? I think I don't think they can draw in UFOs or stuff like that. That's just my thought on it. Because I'm a facts guy. If I don't have the facts, it's just, you have to show me, okay? But anyway, what the analyst said, and by the way, that meeting was with my attorney there, and I wasn't alone. It was only a few years ago too. But he says one of the things about this communication with contact with this phenomena is if whatever you're prone to think internally, if you think about leprechauns, you're going to see leprechauns. You think about aliens, you're going to see aliens. Okay. And it's stronger at a distance, according to them, according to him. He has a group of 8 scientists that are working on it. That's what he told me. I don't know if it's true or not. Okay. And he was working with Bigelow Industries, aerospace, if that tells you anything. Yeah. And he was saying that the farther away, you're more apt to, it's a defense system for the actual phenomenon itself. So it can make it look and appear any way you want. And the closer you get, and this is the reason why you want to meet with us separately, who else was out there with me that night, is the closer you get, the stronger it can be, with the exception of if you are in the sphere of influence, which is like if you're within 10 or 15 feet of the air, of the craft itself, then you see it for what it is. So that, based on what he said there, oh, and also this is fascinating. He said that anytime you have contact with this phenomena, and it's direct contact, they have determined that it will leave through an MRI, you'll be able to see a signature in your brain on it. Okay, so they can see who's been contacted and who actually hasn't, according to him.
Is this a box you can check at the office when you go in for your scan? Can you be like, check me if I've been in contact?
No. Here's the shady part. The shady part is he wanted us to go with him to Stanford for this research group. And I'll tell you what, there's no way I'm going to go to some research group somewhere, even Stanford, and have them, do MRIs on me and stuff like that. That's just crazy stuff. That's according to him. But the tendency, I do believe, according to my contact, if you're right around the craft itself, you see it for whatever it is, and there's no fantasizing or stuff like that happening. They do it. I think it's my guess is that they do it as a defense. So you can't really make direct contact or something with it. I know this sounds bizarre, but
no, it actually makes so much sense, because if you think about it, it's even a form of like mimicry. Like in nature, we find this all the time with moths that look like owls' eyes on them. So the predator of the bird that would prey on the moth is on the moth, so it looks like something else. So there's this mimicry aspect, the bugs that look like leaves. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Even cuttlefish and octopus can blend exactly into the texture of their environment as a defense mechanism. So this actually makes complete sense that they would appear some way. Now, what you described sounds like more of a technology, which I've also heard in some reptilian accounts. Like the reptilians, someone, these amazing stories of someone walks into a record store in the middle of nowhere, and someone's working behind the counter and they got too close to him and the shield failed. And so they were in this sphere of influence because they got too close and they could see through the disguise, basically. Just like on a moth, when you get close enough to it, our physical eyes aren't tricked anymore. Maybe it's something more cognizant. Maybe it does connect more to your consciousness in this way. And this also would explain like screen memories, people saying they saw owls, these giant owls or whatever, and then it turned out to be a gray a lot later on, or monkeys at the foot of your bed, and then all of a sudden it's something much different later on, and now you're abducted by Flavor Flav like Pam Nance later on in life. So,
but
Ryan,
the question was C5.
Well,
the question is what.
Yeah, just what your thoughts were.
I never answered the question, did I?
You did.
I don't think I did.
Right up top, and then But if you'd like to go on ahead on it,
the C5 stuff, like for example, Greer, I have no respect for him, zero. The guy is an opportunist and entertainer. I told him this to his face across from a dinner table. I mean, this is, the guy is not legit. You can't go out and just call stuff in. I do believe that there are psychic makeups of certain people that are more prone to see UFOs or these UAPs than other people. I do believe that. Who knows what it would cause, why it happens. Denise was talking about if you have a non-believer there. I think it's more about your genetics than anything else. If you're going to have a possible communication or something like that, but to draw them in, I don't know about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know what it reminds me of, though, is Dr. Lynn McTaggart and her intention studies with the power of 8, and these intention studies where they stand around. There's been research with Chinese doctors doing this. A lot of research has gone into this about just putting hands on someone and 8 people or so that all believe, in the same thing. Everybody's on board with the idea, to what Denise was talking about. And there's a change that occurred. And Pam, that's what you were talking about with your connection to consciousness studies. When involved in this, it is much more of a group setting of more of like Dr. Lynn McTaggart's work, and it's well documented. It's absolutely fascinating. Also, I wanted to get Ryan's take on this. So, Ryan, have you ever been laying there in bed and you mentally call in a UFO, or are you more like, not tonight, guys? Because I'm shocked they've let you hang out with us for this long. You should have been abducted by now. On your schedule.
I am still here, aren't I?
Right.
Yeah. No. Some of the interactions I had about 10 years ago were like tabletop procedures, sort of more like that typical abduction phenomenon where you've got skinny white beings with black eyes, but some of them I saw putting the black lenses in, really long hands, 4 fingers, about half as long again as ours, with a thumb that's like vestigial, with masks on, feeling around in my teeth, drilling things into me, put something in the back of my spine that was incredibly painful. After all that was over, I said to them, how about you come and visit me, but in a more of a friendly domestic setting. Come and have a beer with me or a coffee or something. So it was like a couple of nights later that I was standing in the kitchen with my wife, and it was having this discussion with her about things, and it was an interesting discussion at the time, but I can't remember what it was about. And then all of a sudden my mind started to cloud over. I felt tired. I knelt down on all fours. I crawled out of the room and I started lining up socks, taking socks. This is a common thing that happens to me where once they're finished interacting with me, I seem to go into a certain state of mind where I become like obsessive compulsive and start lining up money, sorting out socks. Then I levitated, put me back into bed, and then I realized that my wife was still in bed and it hadn't been my wife. And then the screen memory fell away, and she was a tall, fair woman with huge blue eyes and a tight black suit with a circular thing on her chest, leaning against the kitchen counter. And then I started to get afraid, and she said to me, I roll my eyes at you, meaning like as a rebuke, because I should know not to be that afraid. And then she left, and that was as an invitation. And then she opened the door, and I heard her walking out down the steps. And then another time, a C5-like event. I've never done it with people in a circle or anything like that, but another one was my daughter and I saw a triangular craft when we were looking at the sky, and I'd been looking up into the sky wanting something like this to happen during the day, with purple and pink hues. Triangular craft wandered across the sky and was performing these maneuvers and zipping back and forth, shot out from about the size of my thumbnail to like a pinprick in the sky and back again, wandered around over the top of our house and then left. And the craft could have been anywhere the size from a small prop-driven plane to the length of a football ground, and I wouldn't be sure depending on how far away it was. I'm not quite sure how far away it was, but certainly they have technologies which I've seen they wear in their helmets. So these particular beings, the Mudgeonner, tall, fair beings, are no more psychic than we are naturally. They rely on technologies, robust technologies, to do lots of different things, to cloak, to become intangible so that their bodies can accommodate other foreign objects so they can walk through walls. They live under our oceans and in our mountains and things like that. They travel around and follow the warmth. And so sometimes habitations will be empty and sometimes not, etc. But they communicate by sometimes abstract ideas, intrusive into your thoughts, sometimes visual images, but it's also sometimes linguistic. So you'll get like a silent voice right in the center of your mind, but sometimes obviously masculine, sometimes obviously feminine, or sometimes neither, just sort of neutral. The information will be expressed in a language that you speak, but it will be expressed much faster than a person could actually articulate. So it's like a packet of information, and it hits almost like a thump. And sometimes if they're quite close, when I do it, my ears pop. Now, they can then use this to get into your mind, understand your thoughts, understand your belief system, and conform to ideas you already have about the paranormal, so as to hide from you, so as to not alarm you significantly. Sometimes they'll pretend to look like a neighbor, or in that instance I mentioned before, my wife, or sometimes even a person that you've known, that you trusted, that's no longer alive, which is particularly concerning afterwards and then you'll think it's a ghost or something like that. But yes, for sure, they can, and they said to me, we apologize for the mesmerization. We apologize for the memory alteration. So these are the words in English they're using in particular. So they're the words I use in my books. But for sure, they use your own vocabulary of ideas and they have been doing it with us for millennia, to conform to preconceived understandings about the way the world works and what they might be, and then they'll be covert like that. Yeah. They've
So
been doing it forever and a day.
So ideally, even what they show you after they say, okay, no, this is the real us, that could even be a screen memory in itself, and they could be some horrible squid monster or something, really, right? You know, but they're just like, they're not ready for that yet. Let's give them the almond-shaped eyes thing. Yeah, we'll tint our.
Well, yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'd like. I mean, yeah, I'm 99.9% sure, without being 100% sure, that I actually know what they look like. But having said that, there's always a possibility I'm wrong too.
Yeah, it's like a screen on a screen, you know? It's interesting. It's just so fascinating. And thank you. You have the most incredible stories, and I'll ask you if you don't mind in a minute to tell us all the creepy one, the one that gives me the chills every time. Denise, what if you don't mind, would you share your contact story with us?
Well, it's occurred since age 2.5, and all the way up to just a few years ago. And then I would say that I was visited rather than taken or escorted aboard a craft. I've seen several different types of crafts. Some I had help with hypnosis to just fill in the blanks, some things that I knew consciously, and I was missing a little piece of tape in between. So I've been escorted by a gray with the great big eyes. He was a small figure when I was a child, and I have recently noted that he has aged. And I never thought that they would age. I've never seen it written, but I can see it in his face. And the other was a mantis entity who was a scientist, and he was working on anything and all things science and medical. He did a medical procedure. He just did what he was supposed to do and didn't react one way or the other. He just went about his business. I've seen a reptilian twice, and I didn't ever care to see one again. So the main two are the mantis and my gray. I call him my escort.
You know, I'm curious on a side note here, just how the mantis interfaces with its reality. Like, no opposable thumb. I'm picturing the little arm things. Like, how does it, like, push buttons and hold beakers? You're talking scientists. How does it get its little coat on with those arms like that? Does it have, like, a thumb or anything? Like, this is a genuine question. I know it sounds silly. I'm actually just curious about the logistics.
Oh, the one I saw did not have a coat on,
Okay, fair enough.
and was manipulating large type instruments, managed to get them where they had to go. I had a needle put in my navel. I had other practices done. And the only expression or emotion that I saw in his face was when I screamed and I yelled and I said, "Stop it." And I said I was in pain. And he leaned right close to my face and looked as if, "What's the matter with, why are you doing that?" He wasn't sure what this reaction was all about. And so that's basically what I saw. I mean, he had an odd stance. His legs were kind of almost in an M shape. He was very, very strong, but you wouldn't know it just looking at him. He looked very slender, like a mantis. But he could, I think, leap across a room without any effort whatsoever.
We've got a few out on the ranch. They're this big, and they can jump, you know, forever. So I can imagine you scale that up to something our size or a little bit bigger. That'd be terrifying. That's very interesting. And another question I just wanted to ask you on this was the transition from doorway to UFO. Do you mind telling us that? This is fascinating, guys.
Oh, well, you mean how I got from my bedroom? Once when I was 2.5 and I first met this entity, he came through my wallpaper, and my wallpaper was all nursery rhyme characters. So I had been looking out the window and saw a craft. My grandfather had the fear on his face when I said, "What's Humpty Dumpty doing up in the sky?" That's who I thought it was. And he put me to bed, and I was looking for Humpty Dumpty in my wallpaper, the nursery rhyme, when this little character came out. He was wearing a hood, long bell-shaped sleeves. I couldn't see one hand, but the other one was carrying some sort of instrument with a light on the end or tool. And he asked me to go with him. And I was a friendly kid, sociable. So I said, okay. And I could see the big dark eyes under the hood. He took my hand, he touched that instrument to the wallpaper in the hallway, and we went right through. And the next thing I knew, I was in a place I didn't recognize. Now I realize it was a craft, and there were other children there.
And that's what's so fascinating is on the other side of a wall where there should have been a room, you instead stepped into a craft. So it replaced an environment, which is wild to me. So you mentally just stepped into a place that shouldn't have been there. It's like opening a door to your closet and it being Narnia behind it. It doesn't, make sense. It's cognitively for us, we have a real tough time even wrapping our minds around this, let alone that Humpty Dumpty came out and hung out with you for a little bit, which is super cool. So Pam, I was curious, if you don't mind, while we're on the contact the stories thread here, if you don't mind just telling us about one of your most poignant. I like your Flavor Flav story, but it's just
yeah. The Flavor Flav. Well, I had an experience as a 10-year-old. I was in my room one night preparing to go to sleep and just felt a presence beside the bed and saw two humanoid beings standing there, very, very human, except for their eyes. Their eyes were very large and dark. But other than that, they had human hair that was sort of lightish brown. They were dressed in black bodysuits, black turtleneck, black pants, a male and a female. And they communicated to me telepathically that they were there to take me because of some karma that needed to be rebalanced from a past life of about 5,000 years ago. And they indicated that in this past life, I had beheaded a sacred white elephant, and they were there to help me. But as a 10-year-old child raised in a Southern Baptist community, I was quite confused, pretty frightened. And the man had this huge timepiece. It looked like a giant pocket watch, and he held it in front of me. And he said, as the hand goes around from like 12 to 12, meaning I guess 60 seconds, we're going to take you. And he held the stopwatch up in front of me, and I watched the seconds tick down. And then I was like on my back being floated out of my bedroom window on board a craft. And while I was on the craft, I couldn't see them, but I could feel that they were behind me doing some type of procedure around my head. I didn't have any pain. I was just extremely frightened. They continued doing whatever they were doing. I would like sort of look back, but was more frightened than anything. I just really didn't want to know what was going on. And the next memory I had, I was back in my bed, and I became very confused. They had relayed this story to me that I had beheaded this sacred white elephant, and they were there to take me, and they had done some procedure to me on the craft. So as I kind of regained my senses, I thought that I'd actually been beheaded, that they had taken my head. And I was just completely hysterical. My dad had left to go pick my mom up from a second shift job. My younger brother was asleep, and my oldest sister was in the kitchen doing her homework. And I remember going to her just completely hysterical, thinking I'd been beheaded. And of course I'm talking and I'm crying, and she's like, you've got your head, what's wrong with you? But no one could console me and convince me otherwise. And what had happened to me was very real, but confusing. But what was interesting, maybe the next day or a couple of days later, I developed a really intense rash from the neck up, covering my entire face. No one could figure out what had caused this rash. My parents took me to the doctor. The doctor didn't have any answers. I was given some cream, and I ended up being out of school for a week or two because I looked pretty monstrous. so, and as an adult looking back, and from accounts that I've heard, that perhaps I'd been exposed to something while on board the craft with this procedure, whatever they were doing. But it was just kind of odd that I developed a rash at the same time I'd had that experience. But that really, was quite traumatic until I became a little bit older and started exploring as a teenager, tarot cards and numerology and astrology and psychedelics, and just trying to kind of understand what this weird event was that happened to me as a kid. And not only that event, but numerous other things as a child, paranormal, craft sightings, one event with my entire family. And it was just, a catalyst that put me on this lifetime of exploration and discovery as to what happened to me that night. It was very strange.
It's very strange. Thank you again for telling us. And I'm just thinking with the countdown thing, that's so interesting to me. I've gone under anesthesia twice, and the anesthesiologist is always, super witty and says, all right, count down from 10. And I get to maybe 2, and then you're out, right? And so it seems like this. It seems like there's some sort of time that needs to occur for you to be in a state to where they can transport you. It's just kind of what it sounds like whenever I hear something like that. It's just very, very interesting. Now, Kathleen, your family's contact experience put this on everyone's mind back in '61. So what was your contact experience like with your mother? Do you mind sharing that with us?
I was terrified. I was lying down on a table of sorts, and there were entities around me doing something. And I only know that because I opened my eyes and I had the memory of that, but it was years before I could actually break through that trauma and see what their faces looked like. And, it was just the grays, the same as took my aunt and uncle. And, I assume that it's just multi-generational in my family. They told me, communicated telepathically to me, time and time again, as they took me periodically over my lifetime, that they were extraordinarily concerned about environmental toxins in my body. They had taken tissue samples to measure that. I did not know it at the time when I was 17 and taken, that there was a barrel plant that they cleaned out barrels. The chemicals in the barrels ended up leaching into the stream that went into the lake, that went into the groundwater around me. It became a disaster area, a major Superfund site. So I can understand now why they were concerned about toxins. I was also about 20 miles from a nuclear base. And I don't know if the concern was about me, if it was about humans, or if it was about the ova that they were extracting to create whatever they were doing. So I can't say for certain. I was terrified for many years that it had a huge impact on my life. One time when I was returned, I was burned on my face and my back. I lost hair. I lost weight. I was very ill for a period of time. The doctor told me that there were people occasionally that he would see who would have these kinds of symptoms, and the doctors discussed it, but they didn't know what caused those symptoms. And finally, through sheer force of will, I decided I was going to break through the terror that I was living with, and this negative attitude toward what was occurring. And it was through hypnosis, self-hypnosis, and having a rapid induction keywords that I could say to myself. And I am a quantum healing hypnosis practitioner, and I was also trained as a hypnotherapist. So I trained myself to overcome the fight or flight response and to project love in their direction rather than this terror. And when I did that, they started to communicate with me. And I was very pleased about that. And they told me, for example, telepathically, that they love me. I don't know if they really do, but it certainly felt good. And I believe it. It helped me to heal. That I am family. That's another thing that they said. So I felt a lot more comfortable with them then. I haven't seen that group, I don't think, since I started to work with Kevin Briggs in 2016 with his Council of Eight. And I was healed by ETs of that illness that I had eventually, but Paul Hamden, from a man from Australia who was an experiencer and a medium, helped me with that. They came and they healed me. And Kevin Briggs' group has given me evidence. I can feel their presence. It's a very strong tingling sensation in my body. I used to have that very strong tingling sensation when I was on craft with the Greys too. And I'm not certain what it is, if it's the electromagnetic energy, or there was always something about raising my vibration, that message I would be given. But the relationship that I have with whoever they are now is positive, and I'm happy to have it. And I think that the experiences that I had in the past when I was fearful helped me to understand to a greater extent what other people feel when they come to me. I'm an advocate for experiencers. When they come to me and with fear, I know why. I know what I went through and how to overcome that now. So I feel that I've really moved ahead as a result of the experiences, and am in a position where I can really assist people at this point.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. Love your perspective on this, and thank you for sharing that. Jim, what about your contact? Now, I'm curious with yours, was it anything, because you had your download and it's absolutely fascinating. I know you've told the story 1,000 times, so that's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm asking you is did you sense any sort of intelligent presence behind it? Do you think there was an entity involved in it in any way, or was it more artificial intelligence like and non-human? Non-biological, let me put it that way.
No, I don't know the answer if it was AI or not. I don't know. I am convinced that the craft wasn't manned. It was just too small.
What about little wee people?
Well, as if you believe in the extraterrestrial theory, I guess, which I don't. So mine was caused by contact. I mean, actually touching it to receive it. I don't think it was something that was I was really supposed to happen. I tell you, I'm listening to these other people. This sounds like, oh my God, all this trauma I'm listening to. And I thought up to this point, I thought I had contact, but apparently not. I've never had any of this stuff happen to me. So my contact is just like totally different. Okay, it was physical. Then, except for the the activation of the light with our technology that I call light, which actually was communication. And can I relate to some of the stuff they say? Yeah, I mean, afterwards you have trauma from it. I definitely did. The only way for me to deal with trauma is to confront it, directly, write about it, talk about it, to a certain point. But yeah, I'm a little bit taken back here.
Right, right. Everyone
Really,
here is awesome.
no, because every there's certain things that each have said so far that, oh yeah, I can relate to that a little bit, you know. And then some of it just reinforces what was told to me by the CIA and that about the what you are preconceived to see, you see. So, but then Ryan brings up a good point. How do you know everything that that wasn't implanted, or that wasn't, that's a tough one. I don't know. There's a lot. I tell you, that's the trouble. If you do get one answer out of all this stuff, yeah, it creates another 50 questions. You know what I mean? I don't know.
That's right.
I'm just, yeah, I'm pretty much taken back by it. I mean, this sounds horrifying what these people are telling me. I mean, oh,
Well, you were pretty scarred from your experience, and what's interesting about it,
I was,
you
I
really
was,
were. You know, I've talked
but
to
I
them.
think they're still having stuff happen to
Well,
them. Yeah,
you may be as well. They just may sense that you're not okay with it and don't let you remember. This is the other interesting part about this. You can
That's
go,
right, Ryan. Ain't that
yeah,
right? I might
right,
not
yeah,
know.
Ryan knows. Yeah, and what I found interesting about your case in relation to everybody else's is everyone else seems to be entity based. It's contact with entities, with bipedal, maybe quadrupedal, but still two arms. In
Right.
Denise's case with the mantis, but it really seems to be more of an entity like thing. With yours, not only
Mhm.
was there no entity present that you saw, but also you received telepathic download like everyone else does, but yours was in binary code. So again, it's more of like an AI thing that's figured out consciousness and can hack it in this way. It's one of these interesting things. But
Yeah,
that's
and
what's so interesting.
and it was actually discovered 30 years afterwards,
Right, right.
and it wasn't by me. So yeah, so it's pretty bizarre, actually.
It's,
I mean, those things. I've come to terms with most of it. I mean, I think the best therapy you have is write about it. I mean, I'm sure you all have books out there, and I bet you all write several books because it does. It's a good thing to write books. It makes, at least for me, it makes me feel better to actually express my fears and my thoughts in detail, and that's the way I confront it. Unlike others that have talked previously to me, I've only had the one investigation or one contact, and that was that night. None since that I know of. So.
yeah, that's the crux, right? Now,
Hmm.
Dr. Scott, your book on Beyond Pascagoula, that's an extension on a very famous and really bizarre case. So what got you attracted to that case in the first place? What about it just mesmerized you to want to write about it?
Well, I started having some form of contact when I was very young. My family was real poor and we didn't have media in our house or anything. And I'd never heard of UFOs or spacemen or anything. And my sister and I were sleeping in the attic room on two sides of an attic room. And this thing was in the room. We both woke up and there was something flying around the room, just a tiny little thing that was like hot metal. And I didn't know what it was. And after a while, I noticed, even though I was a kid, I noticed that it would avoid running into things and go around the furniture and stuff. And the room was dark. And after a while, it flew up toward the ceiling and it went before it got to the ceiling. And it was an attic room. The walls came together with about 3 feet in between them. And there was a chandelier. And without feeling anything, it flew over the chandelier. And then I didn't know my sister was awake at the time either. So I had another witness, but we didn't discuss it. And it flew to the chandelier and started circling. and it didn't feel its way around or anything. It seemed to know where it was, and then it came down. Well, at that point, we both became absolutely terrified, just beyond anything you could believe, and ran out of the room and fell down the stairs, bumped into each other, and couldn't get the door open, and ran shrieking to our parents, and they didn't believe us. And at the time, I didn't understand anything about it. And it was years and years later when I read the book by Jenny Randalls, who said that sometimes people have UFO sightings when they're kids. They have small UFO sightings. Well, this, I had the feeling that it could make me see what it wanted. It was pretty good. We both woke up at about the same time. I think she woke up earlier than me, but we didn't see it come in the room or anything. So it may have had some influence over our minds some way. And then we both became terrified at the same time. And so I thought it was something metal, but years later, I had this dream about parallax, and I could see an airplane. And when it was close, it should be larger, and when it's farther away, it should be smaller. In this case, when it was farther away, it was bigger. So I thought this is just the opposite of parallax. And so I just thought that this was an image that both of us were seeing, which seemed kind of funny. But we'd never heard of UFOs or anything, and I don't have any idea what it was, but I thought there was something, contact and something like mind control going on.
It is interesting, and I love that you brought up the kids getting kid UFOs. I'm reminded of the Kara event in Japan in the 70s. Have you guys ever heard of this with the it looked like a hat, like a small hat, and these boys found it in the field, and they flipped it over, and they could see there's like 30 pressed holes in the bottom of it, and it's got a little star pattern on it. It's a fascinating case. And so the boys took it home. One of them put it in their backpack, and they took it to school, and they looked inside the backpack, and it was gone. And then they found it again, allegedly, and then they put it in like a cage, like a Faraday cage, and then carried it around for a little bit, and then it started vibrating or something, and then they opened it, and it vanished. So there's these interesting cases, but it was a wee little UFO, it was like a toy. And so that's how it appeared to them. But it still displayed these miraculous properties that we just can't physically wrap our mind around with the physics understanding that we have today, which is what's so fascinating about this. I mean, of all the things that are so fascinating. So Mark, I want to get your take on this, buddy. You and I have not been experienced yet, but I am going to request that if we are ever abducted, they do it to both of us at the same time, and I'll come pick you up, okay? And then we'll zoom around. All right, deal.
Well, as I'm hearing these amazing stories, first of all, they resonate based on the research I've done. I've heard many things like what I'm hearing, as remarkable as they sound. But I'm also thinking about more subtle forms of contact, because most of the stories have been dramatic. And when I say subtle contact, I mean, like, where do ideas come from? If we have a creative insight, where did it just pop in out of nowhere? Is it biological? And a lot of my earlier work, especially my first book, and Upside Down Thinking, is all about the idea that the brain doesn't produce consciousness, but that the brain is more like an antenna, receiver, transmitter, filter, processing mechanism of a consciousness that's beyond the body. So what I'm wondering, and there's a great new book out called The Science of Channeling by Helene Wabe, who's the director of research at the Institute of Noetic Sciences. And she talks about this idea that we're all channeling, we're all getting this information all the time, but it can be in a subtle manner. In some cases, it's very dramatic and the person, speaks in a different tone. But in other cases, we're just getting information and we don't perceive it as something external. But when we deconstruct it, maybe these ideas are coming from other forms of intelligence. And I wonder in my own life, I was on a completely different life track, and now I'm writing books about aliens and life after death. How do those ideas come in, for example? So it's just food for thought for all of us in terms of what's guiding our lives.
It's so wild, and it's great that you pointed this out. Tesla even talked about this, that he was a receiver for information, not the one creating it. And it is interesting when you think about ideas. As a musician, I've talked to several musicians that I've written music that I swear was not me. Something came in, and one of my favorite songs I've ever written, I feel like I can't take credit for it because it's so awesome, but it's unlike anything else. But it just flooded in, and it just appeared there. And a lot of musicians talk about this, the idea of the muse and this channeling of information. How it relates to ETs, I've heard, these stories about the Greys calling us, the human beings here that they interact with, vessels. And so Peter Whitley also should have had him on tonight, actually. Now that I think about it, I'm just talking about him the whole time. Peter Whitley also, that Astral Travels to UFOs, has talked about when he was on a UFO, a gray was showing him something sort of like a science experiment like Denise was talking about, and there was a blue swirling liquid in something, and he said, oh, that's your soul. You guys are just vessels. And so to this idea, it's like we're avatars, you know, and our consciousness kind of zoomed into this body, and it's being controlled or something somewhere else. And it lends to this idea. What do you guys think about this, that the Greys call us vessels? Pam, have you thought about this at all or heard this?
I haven't really thought or heard about it as far as coming from the Greys, but I do hold Michael Newton's writings pretty close to my chest. I don't know if you guys are familiar with his work, but he was a psychologist for about 40 years that he worked with folks to help with weight loss and smoking. But over time, yep. Over time, other information started to come through, and he realized that he was tapping into a part of the patient's consciousness that was still connected to this life between lives. And so basically what he said is that as energy beings, we cannot bring all of our energy into this life, all of our ability to have a full awareness and connect to our like total consciousness. We just can't do it. We're too dense. We're too heavy in this gravity-laden environment. We can only bring a small portion. So we leave part of ourselves or the most of ourselves on this other side. And perhaps that's what we're connected to, is that piece of consciousness that we've heard referred to as the higher self, or, you know, the golden cord that connects us to our higher self that has been written about for, you know, ages. So I think that there is a connection to this other realm, this other side. But I'm not that well versed on what people are getting from the Greys as far as you know, them holding our souls.
and maybe, yeah, and this is why they can manipulate and all this kind of stuff, is they kind of know something we don't, you know. And to what you said about us being, you know, in my mind as you were describing this, I'm thinking of those mini submarines, you know, that they send down to the Marianas Trench, or these, you know, things that go into really hostile places, you know, around these thermal vents under the ocean or something where we can't go, but we want to see what's going on. So we create machines to go do it for us, or interact with a hostile environment or environment not conducive to our survival. And so it's almost like our consciousness is there. It's, from anyone's point of view, a little crab running around on that thing, it's intelligently controlled, but it's by us. So we have this kind of as above, so below sort of model to look at this. And I just find it interesting that now we're the drones. You know, that just blows my mind, you know, if that's, you know, something to ponder. It just seems so interesting to me. So Denise, what do you think? Are we like just vessels? Is this just a game, and me and you are at some sleepover in the other side, and we're just all playing this, you know, game on, you know?
I don't think it's a game, and I'm well familiar with what Pam was talking about, and I've read all those books, and I felt drawn into what I feel comfortable with when I read those. But as far as the souls, I had an experience that I can't explain. On a craft where there were many people and several different types of entities, and they were asking us to do a project of theirs that they weren't even comfortable with. And I was given a black box that had no seams. It had nothing in the way of an entry that I could see. It didn't weigh very much. I felt emotional when they gave it to me. Some people were trying to run away from the situation. There were two different aisles in this huge craft. It had a balcony, And I was taken from here in Florida. And when the balcony opened, I thought I was going to fall. Something held me. I even recognized a person that I know in my city now and verified it by asking him if he owned an outfit like he was wearing. And he said, "You'll never see it. I only wear that at home." Well, I did see it. But we were asked at a certain cue to drop the boxes off the balcony. I was looking down at granite cliffs and pine trees and little A-framed homes, and it was very cold. And when they gave the cue, I dropped the box, and it went halfway down towards this little A-frame and then just disappeared, dispersed in a kind of a sparkly situation. Was that the snow? I don't know, but the box disappeared. And then I was told that that box contained the soul of a new hybrid, and it was going to the parents where it would be reborn.
Oh, like in the movie Prometheus, you know, where the guy's standing on the thing, he drinks in his biology, and he falls in and creates us, allegedly. This is
my husband
fascinating.
had been removed from the bedroom. He found himself at the computer, and he came through. My cheeks were all rosy and ice cold. My feet were cold. The bottom of my nightgown was all wet.
I mean, so trace evidence. This is definitely first kind here. You know, what I was thinking about with this is, okay, so the hybrids I'd like to talk to you guys about now. We can go down that vein, but one of the things that's interesting about this is on a very deep level, perhaps, these entities exist in another dimension, let's say, and they don't vibrate at the frequency of 3D, and that's why they need to take our astral body or a piece of us or invite us in some form that can phase through walls and doors and roofs and all kinds of stuff, and then go aboard a craft or an area outside of our space and time to do something, right? Now, do you think that the hybrid program could be a way of them infusing with our DNA so that they can walk amongst us and be on this plane, not necessarily physically so that we wouldn't be able to, you know, point them out or distinguish them from any other human walking around, but also vibrationally? Like that they need to get something in our DNA or something here to exist in this physical 3D plane. What do you guys think about that?
I'll say something.
Yeah, please.
The Mudgeonner don't talk in those kinds of terms, and the way they seem to come across to me and the way they express themselves is that they are just as flesh and blood as we are. And they don't use terminology, although other beings may, like vibrations and they hardly ever talk about different dimensions as well. But they do require our DNA, and they are closely enough related to us to interbreed with us. And they don't need to augment that process necessarily with science as well. They are that closely related to us. But their genomics are unraveling, and they are susceptible to diseases that we aren't, to a lot of dust and pollen is an allergen to them. If they're injured, it takes them a lot longer to heal than we do. And they are constantly reinforcing their genomic structure with ours over their generations. So they utilize us in that way. So in a certain way, we are free-range ancient humans to them, where they are, it's quite complicated, their association, their history, their real their relationship with us genetically. But to make a long story short, they are a version of us that is in a much worse state. But they can't really work out a way to successfully, permanently fix that problem. So from time to time, they need access to us. And sometimes it's in the old-fashioned way where they actually copulate with us, you know, and there's a famous case of Peter Curry in Sydney in 1992. The tall, fair woman he had an interaction with, and then again, you know, Antonio Villas-Boas in Brazil in 1957 had an interaction like that. And this is the same race that I know, the fair, blue-eyed ones. So, and they're doing that not to try to walk and be more flesh and blood and somehow be more physical than us. They are the bone of our bone, the flesh of our flesh. And they've said that to me on a couple of occasions. We are you. We are the same as you. But they require our assistance and augmentation. They've been succubi and incubi all through the ages. In Gaelic mythology, they're called Llan and She, the fairy lover. They'll come and interact with us in that way. And so So yeah, so that's I know in that kind of sense, these kinds of beings sound a bit boring in that sense that we're not talking here about non-physical, super sensible realities and things like that. They have mentioned to me a place they call Agaling, the Black Star, which is a place beyond duality that they use to travel out through portals from here to there, a place that is neither this nor that. It's not actualized reality. It is all potential. It is all worlds at once in one, and no worlds, everything and nothing. And they use that to move. So that is interdimensionality, I suppose. And that's, but their technologies are so advanced that the dichotomy between physicality and non-physicality kind of breaks down. Because if you're talking about being able to achieve that kind of thing through robust technologies, or shift your atomic structure to walk through solid walls, are you a spiritual being suddenly, or are you still a material being? I mean, that depends on how you want to define your terms, really. But yeah, so that's a boring answer from me, really. That the Mudgeonah don't claim to be so, hyper or super physical or non-material in that way.
Yeah, it's the Arthur C. Clarke quote, right? Any high advanced technology would be indistinguishable from magic. And so, yeah, I mean, this cloaking technology, what they can do as far as, we all know, molecules just make up everything, and it's 99.99, invisible space or empty space. So they figured out a way to kind of, breach that. And that's just, could be viewed as a technology. But if you took, a lighter back to the Stone Age, you're a god. So it's just the perspective of it's very interesting, which kind of is why we, put so much on them, why we hold them in such high regard. But also it's interesting that they're kind of dependent on us, even if we are some sort of resource or something. So now it speaks to sort of a symbiotic relationship, and I don't know that I like our role in it, but I don't think that we have really clear definitions of that. So, Dr. Scott, go ahead. No, Ryan, please.
I'll just quickly add, sorry, I don't see their relationship to us as parasitic. Yeah, it's symbiotic because they live here permanently. Our best interests are their best interests.
Right.
Our health and well-being as a separate species to them, from which they gather, genomic data from time to time, is essential. And so they care for us and they care for the planet and things like that, because otherwise, it's an existential threat to them if they aren't tending the garden, so to speak. This terrarium of Earth that is theirs in a way and not ours in a certain way. But anyway, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, you'd want to, grass-fed and free-ranged, and the happiest product makes the best animal, or make the best resource, whatever they're getting out of us. Dr. Scott, what do you think is going on with the hybrid program, the alleged hybrid program?
I don't know, because I've had dreams about like semiconductors where you can put a whole mass of information to a tiny little spot. And it seems to me like you could reduce a whole human to just a little bit of energy that you can translate into a human, or just have a little bit of energy. And so it seems to me like it'd be real easy for something more advanced to just reconstitute a person like we do, making instant coffee or something. And so, I don't know size and dimension and everything, whether that's important or whether there's just a certain amount of information that can take different forms.
Yeah, it's fractal, at a level. You constantly zoom in, you think of the Mandelbrot sets and stuff like that. It's fascinating. That'll blow your mind. And again, back to the small people thing, the Nazca mummies, these wee creatures that were found, allegedly, again. They're described exactly like how Ryan describes his entity. So it's really interesting with the vestigial thumb, with the long fingers, the 4 total. It's just the similarities are pretty cool. So Kathleen, what do you think about the hybridization program?
Some of Ryan's statements resonated with me. From what I know in terms of the amount of research that I've done over 32 years, and also from my personal experiences that I speak of tonight, it is mutually beneficial. They have lost the ability to procreate in the manner in which they used to. They're attempting to upgrade their own race by using their master geneticists using our DNA to even gain some of the emotions that they had lost over time. And the reports that we receive now about people who have been on craft being taken by grays, oftentimes we hear that there were emotions expressed. There were facial signatures to indicate pleasure from the grays. So I think that that is probably part of their reason for doing what they're doing. One woman whose case I worked on, and this is only one, but it was very interesting to me. She was taken back in the 1950s. And they told her that they were taking people so that they could determine who would survive the environmental collapse of our planet. And I don't know what they were looking for, but that's a possibility. Another possibility is they're attempting to upgrade our DNA to move us ahead on an evolutionary scale, because they're extraordinarily concerned about our use of nuclear weapons. And they have said that they have seen the collapse of the ecosystem due to nuclear war on other planets, and they would not want that to happen here. So they're doing what they can to intervene. In terms of hybrids living on our planet, from my knowledge of sociology and human development, I can't imagine that a hybrid raised on an ET craft in an ET environment could ever be fully human and behave as a human being on this planet. I mean, I could be wrong. People have said, but they're so intelligent. I don't think intelligence has anything to do with that. I think that it's more maybe emotional intelligence, but it's part of just being human. And in terms of being on craft, I wanted just to say, it seemed like I was as real as I am in this room right now. And they seemed as real. They seemed like I was interacting with other humans, only they didn't have a human appearance. So,
Interesting.
You know, that's sort of my take on it.
Yeah, and it's a great observation. It's a great point that you make. Denise, what are your thoughts?
Oh, I'd have to agree, but I mean, I resonate with several people here tonight. I think we've all had our own experiences, and we're beginning to examine them and compare them, the commonalities among each other. Where does the truth lie? What are we willing to accept and take as our own? I have very strong feelings about mine from age 2.5 until just a couple of years ago. I was awake. I know what was going on. I know what my escort looked like in the beginning and looks like now. And what Pam said, we've got to start working with consciousness, and do we leave a part of us behind? And many of us have had near-death experiences. I've had one, and I've seen a couple of things that are awfully close to what we experience in our ET world.
That is what is so interesting. The variety of ways that the human brain can get into this state and either raise vibration, if we want to put it that way, but either way, thin a veil of some sort. You kind of switch off a filter or something. Again, I'm thinking of meditation practices, absolutely the contact experience near death, absolutely. Out-of-body experiences mimic this. Astral travel does the same thing. Psychedelic experiences from a variety of different types of psychedelics as well. You talk about the machine elves with the DMT. You talk about all sorts of things on psilocybin. LSD is a completely different thing, but these things mimic contact. You contact with intelligent beings. You're in a different world that feels very, very real. It perturbs your filter of this stable reality that you're in. but it's very familiar. It's something that you can absolutely swear, but when you come back, it's very hard to articulate. So on these levels, it seems that this can be accessed in a few different ways, but it's just so interesting, the variety of ways that this appears to everyone, as well as it seems the consistency. A question I've been asking contactees lately has been, have you ever been contacted by a different type of entity? Usually it's the same one forever. It's if you're contacted by the Pleiadians, that's your crew, and that's who you see forever. You might see a gray every now and then, but really you stick to that. Now, Denise, you have an interesting case where you've seen a variety. Ryan, you've had a very specific type of interaction. Same with Jim, same with Kathleen. So, and Dr. Scott as well. It seems that this thing just kind of has these preferences of how it presents itself to you. Now, this kind of changes as well. Like in Pam's case, it started as something different and evolved into these humanoid-looking beings that were just standing there. So this variety of type of contact is what's so fascinating to me, and I know to a lot of y'all as well, is how it presents itself, and also how the human being is able to achieve this through a variety of different ways, rather than just seeing a craft in the sky and now I'm on board it. That is something that's fascinating to me. So what do you guys think consciousness plays into specifically the non-human intelligences that we're talking about here in that type of contact? What role does consciousness play in this? Pam, do you have a thought on that?
Oh dear. Well,
it's a deep one. Just a softball,
is.
you know, lobbed it up for you.
I think consciousness comes into play. It has to come in from your perspective and what you've experienced and how you interpret consciousness. You know, for me, it began as a very young child. This alteration in what should be a normal, conscious, everyday life was anything but. You know, I had just really bizarre experiences beginning at 4, continuing through the age of 5 to 9, when I could like leave my body and fly around, and then the 2 beings, you know, at the age of 10. And so my perspective was quite different than, say, my group of friends that I ended up being really close to when, as a teenager, they were very open-minded and, you know, believed my experiences, but they were coming from a different perspective. And it was when I became much older, you know, and I met people who had had encounters and or studied different mechanisms to change consciousness, that, you know, I realized that I wasn't alone as far as my perspective and how I perceived my conscious environment. But I think it has to be affected by what you experience and the path that you're led down. You know, it's not one size fits all. And I'm not sure if I even answered your question.
You did. It's brilliant, because actually it made me think of a couple of other things. And near-death experiences, shared death experiences, where I heard a story very recently about 3 people that crossed over at the same exact time. One person was met with a family member that had passed on already. One to, I want to say like a gray, like an entity, an extra dimensional entity is how they perceived it. And then one Buddha. And they were all told the same thing in a different way that presented itself to them. They all survived. And then the 2 that said that something else was going to happen, they died within this certain small window of time. And the third one continued on. And that's what they were told. Hey, you're going to die really soon. You're going to die really soon. You're going to continue on. By these different entities, they all come back and they share their stories with one another. And this, again, it's very personal. Now, something that's interesting to this as well is these folks experience this near-death experiences, or the shared death experience, where they were contacted by 3 different physical entities from their perspective. But also you have cases like in the Pascagoula event, you have all sorts of types of events where they're taken and they experience a similar thing on a similar craft. Betty and Barney Hill, great example. You and your mom as well, Kathleen. So you have folks that experience the same thing, and it's a shared experience like that. The same entities appear, and so this also runs a ripple in this thing. It's like they're one step ahead. It just, like Jim, like you said, man, it just makes you ask 1,000 million more questions. It's just never ending on this thing. So Mark, I know you have some thoughts on consciousness and how this ties in. You joined us for last week's co-collective, so thank you for coming, you know, back to back. What are your thoughts on that, man? Consciousness and ET contact, dude.
Well, the way I look at consciousness is that it is the basis of all reality, and that we are all interconnected at the level of consciousness, even though we perceive separation. And to me, that would apply to all other life forms. So contact is with, in some ways, it's with ourself, but it's with a different form of an individuation, which to me lends credence to the idea that these beings care about what happens to us because we are them to some degree. So there would be an incentive. And in some cases, the incentive for benevolent beings is probably positive, and for more negative beings, they might have a different type of incentive. But the way in which we are orienting our consciousness, as I see it, on the planet and as individuals, is somehow relating to this overall contact phenomenon.
I not agree more. McKenna, Jacques Vallée, even Hynek there toward the end talked about this being a psychosomatic phenomena, that you were actually being contacted by yourself and you were going within, and this physical craft only appears that way because, again, the technology or your capabilities, just these are fascinating thoughts to me. And back to what Kathleen was talking about the them not wanting us to jack with nukes, that we hear this a lot, and this lends a lot of credence to kind of what Ryan's experiences are, is that they're humans from a different timeline, but in the future. And so they wouldn't want us messing up the place because they're going to be here soon. You know, they're going to want it in a little bit. So it's in their best interest for not only us to survive in whatever way that they can help us out with that, but also in not destroying this place and just tanking it for hundreds of thousands of years. So like, we're going to show up before that. So this is our playground here in not too long. And you kids don't need to be screwing with it. This is the same reason I don't give my chickens matches. They just don't. They burn the coop down. You just leave it alone. Just don't give them that stuff. They're better off without it. They don't need it anyway. So to one of these things as well, I'm very curious about, Ryan, what is your perspective on this tie to consciousness? And if you don't mind, will you tell that story about your room? Ugh.
Oh, yeah. With the consciousness thing, well, I've always had a soft spot for idealism. You know, when you're talking about in philosophy, in metaphysics, idealism is the opposite, really, on the spectrum of materialism. Is all reality material? Is all reality an idea? Is it all consciousness as base reality? Yeah. And I've always had a soft spot for that kind of idea. And I think the Majina have an understanding of the world that is something like that as well. But I used to think that, but I've sort of, my perspective shifted a little bit to think that their understanding of it is a monism, in the sense that they think that all reality is made out of one substance, yes, but that it is a substance that has the properties of both mind and matter. So it's not idealism and it's not materialism. It's some kind of mixture of the two from their perspective. I'm fairly certain that's the way they see things. They don't have that distinction that we normally have between the two. And as for their technologies, they use technologies that interface with their consciousness, with their minds. They definitely do, yeah. And they wear helmets. These helmets, they're suits that you normally see these beings in, actually dark, with goggles that glow red at night, with a long nose piece that hangs down. Yeah, that's it. And a helmet. The nose piece is to resonate and amplify sounds, and they hoot and roar and make these sounds that can carry massive distances. That's related as well to their, like, they have these camouflage languages where they mimic wildlife. So they bark and chirp, speaking all different kinds of camouflage codes that they use out in the wilderness, that to us just sound like animal life. And sometimes they hoot and trumpet with these things. And then they have a breathing device. They can breathe our oxygen and everything, but it's for allergens, to keep out allergens. And then like a light on their chest. And they can cloak in these, they can levitate, they can become intangible, they can become, it's a super soldier suit, really. It's soldier grade. And they also have claws on their hands, like prosthetic claws, when they're wearing these suits. Sometimes you see them in cloaks as well, with hooded cloaks while they're wearing these suits. And I've seen them in cloaks, some of them 8 to 9 feet tall, which is just an impressive, amazing thing to see. But they have technology in the helmets, and with this they can control other devices. They can control their craft. They can control you and overtake your consciousness and move you around, mesmerize you, make all sorts of suggestions to you. And where do you and they begin and end? Well, that's something that's unanswerable in the end. That sort of ties into what someone was saying before. I've forgotten who was talking about it, sorry, but the idea that you don't really understand or know exactly what thoughts or ideas are your own when they're manipulating in this kind of way. Yeah, so consciousness is important, perhaps on a metaphysical level, like that, but also definitely on the level of their technologies seem to use and require that to interface. And they also control animals in this way, control wildlife, control us, and control their own devices and things. Yeah.
Yeah, this is what's wild too about them consciously interfacing with their craft, that there's no real physical interface. And that's our biggest issue is how we interface with our technologies. They can already think faster than us, but for us to think and then send that signal down to the finger to push the button, that's the issue, right? That's why computers are so huge. They can cram it into something that big, but for you to interface with it and enjoy the product, enjoy the experience, it has to be large enough for us to interact with. So this tapping it into consciousness is a very interesting way to go about that. Do you mind sharing that story with us, brother? Just because, honestly, I just want to hear it.
This is the eyes you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is like hijacking my visual cortex or something. I'm not sure how they do it. But in some circumstances, they don't allow me to see what's happening at the time. And it's like they may think it will frighten me too much. I'm not quite sure. But there have been instances where I wake up at night and I can feel that they're there. I just get this feeling in my body and I know there's a presence in the house. And then I see the ceiling of my bedroom, and like on the periphery of my vision, I can see like the lamp on a desk. But then when I turn my eyes, the image doesn't change. And when I turn my head, it's still the same image of the ceiling. And then I feel their hands on me. And sometimes I'll levitate first, but sometimes they'll just be there. I'll feel their hands on me, doing things to me. Usually it doesn't hurt, but it sounds like it should, like they're opening me up. In the morning, there'll be nothing. But even turning me over onto my front and pushing my head into the bed, and I can still only see the ceiling and the lamp and everything. So yeah, that's the one that gives you the chills. Yeah.
Yes, every time. And only because it's like they take a snapshot of your vision, a screenshot of how you could do it on your phone, and whatever you're seeing, no matter what's going on around it, that's what you're seeing. And so for their ability to hijack your vision like this, and like it's open, but that is, to me, that trips me out so much. It's so disorienting.
It does sound quite primitive though, in a way. Like
this is the thing.
You'd like to think that technology was more sophisticated so they could allow for that. Right. But it's like they've just gone, oh, we'll just use this. We haven't got the right devices on us or something like that. We'd have to go home again to get the stuff. So in some ways it strikes me as being sort of a low grade technology, but it's still like impressive.
Yeah, it's like putting a gorilla in a cage and just putting a paper mural of the jungle up behind it. It's like it's so not real. It's in our minds we make them feel better, but it's like even they're like that. We know that's not trees, dude. It's just an interesting thing. So I want to kind of continue with this consciousness thing. So Dr. Scott, what's your thoughts on this? Because I know you've thought about it.
Yeah, well, I guess people say that they see things going through the walls, or they see them levitating, which is impossible for us. But then it makes me wonder whether our reality is real too, because we may just have all these limits that aren't real. And it's not like they're affecting us so that we see something different. It's just that we're limited in our reality, and maybe we're just not seeing reality.
I think about this a lot with our visual acuity, how, you've got the stuff outside of it, and then even our hearing, like we can only go 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Dog whistles, obviously, there's low hums that occur outside of our hearing range. And so, yes, maybe there's something, even another sense that we're governed by, to have this experience. And then that's the real question is why? I'm just curious what all of you think about this. Why were you contacted? Like, why you, and why haven't I? Why haven't Mark and I been contacted yet? I think we're high vibe guys. We would be a lot of fun on a UFO. I think it's just because I would ask too many questions. It wouldn't shut up. Maybe that's their thing. They just brought me back real quick. And they're like, don't let him remember this. He talks too much. So Denise, why do you think it was you?
My personal opinion, I think that I signed up for this. I agreed. I signed a contract. I did something that brought it on so early in my life, and it's just going to continue. It was in my family. I don't know if they felt the same. I never asked them, but that's just my opinion. Simple. I think I agreed to it.
Pam, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with Denise. I think that I've lived many, many lives in pursuit of these types of things, like a better understanding of consciousness, and whether that be through medicine or religion. But I do feel a very strong connection to past lives, and having lived this type of life of being on a path of exploration and knowledge seeking. And I also think that, you know, you can be born into bloodlines that are more conducive to having experiences. And for me, it comes through my maternal ancestry, which is Native American and Spanish Basque. I have a lot of women in the history of my family that were healers and root doctors, midwives, psychics, great grandmother, great aunts, my mom. So when I was having experiences as a child, I was not discouraged or made to feel that I was, you know, something I shouldn't talk about. My mom listened to me and encouraged me. And so I think, you know, I chose the family that I chose for that reason, to have that openness and being able to have the experiences that I had as a kid, and not feel, you know, like I was crazy. And so I think you can choose these things, and whether it be for soul growth or in an effort to help others on our planet, as far as raising the consciousness and awareness of everyone here, that, you know, we could have a much better world. We're meant to have a better world. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
So interesting. And bloodlines, speaking of bloodlines, Kathleen, are you down that vein as well? That was a pun, by the way.
Yes, apparently it was genetically carried in my family. And, you know, I don't know how many generations it goes back. I was told that they have had contact with 5 generations. And in hypnosis, I recalled being on craft when I was 3 years old and having a great time with a little boy levitating a little disc, and having a gray and a girl who was a little bit older than I was looking on, and she was just delighted at what I was doing. Now, I don't know. I mean, I had no conscious recall of that. And everything else, I've had some conscious recall. So I can't say for certain that it actually did occur. It could have been confabulation, but it certainly seemed real. And so that if it did occur when I was 3 years old, then the reason might be that this was something that I agreed to in a previous lifetime.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus as well. It's a chosen experience. It's like a vampire. You got invited in. Dr. Scott, why do you think that you were contacted, even as a child? What do you think that's all about?
Well, I think it's my sister too. Maybe she was a contact. Maybe I was the observer or something, for all I know. But I don't know. It makes your ego maybe feel good to think, oh, you were contacted. But on the other hand, what if the thing's the devil that's contacting you or something horrible? And so you don't want to be too egotistical about it in case you're interpreting things incorrectly. But I came from a real skeptical family where you weren't allowed to even talk about UFOs when we were kids, so we didn't. But I found out that other members of the family had experiences that they didn't talk about either when I grew up. But I just don't have any idea.
It's interesting. And then even two seemingly disconnected people, Charlie Hickson and Calvin Parker, both experienced the same thing, both abducted. I mean, was this in their plan? And then they kind of lived lifetimes that brought them together at this specific point. You know, I mean, it all comes into question at that point, the synchronicities, the paths that we all take, even to be brought together. And maybe the fate, you know, this hand of synchronicity is really guided by some entities that are just outside of our visual acuity.
That
And, you know,
synchronicity was also with Pascagoula.
absolutely. Yeah. Do you mind going on with that?
Well, there were two reasons. I mean, you asked me that before. My book is Beyond Pascagoula. But one reason I got into it was because Philip Mann wanted me to interview people and do research. But another thing is that when many, many, many years ago, my mother called me and said she heard a noise. And I was in Missouri and she was in Ohio, 600 miles away. And so I joked with her and told her she was insane. And she'd always said, if she shows signs of dementia, we should tell her. And so, you're crazy, go see the insane asylum and everything. But, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. Later, she said, she called and she was a real skeptic. And she said there was this big, huge flap going on. Everybody was seeing them. People were hiding in their houses and everything. And I didn't pay attention to that for years and years and years. But one day I walked in the library and just decided to look and see if I could find a date for when that sound happened. And I didn't expect to. There was billions of papers and I didn't even know the date, but I guessed, and I found it. And it turned out to be exactly the same time as the Pascagoula abduction. And so something happened to me the same time as that. But at that time, I didn't pay attention to the abduction. I paid attention to the sound. And a lot of my book is on the sound and not about the abduction because it was pretty interesting too.
Well, and the way you were able to connect it, you found some phenomenal things, and it really is beyond Pascagoula. You've nailed it on this. So, and I'm excited to hear the next book as well. Philip told me that's coming out next year, so I'm excited for it. Jim, why do you think you were contacted, brother?
Oh, I think that I'm a person of circumstance. Okay, I was just at the wrong place. I volunteered that night to work. I mean, I don't think it's any grand plan. But to go back to a couple of things, I do believe there's a connection with imprinted DNA from, I don't know, 10, 20, 30,000 years ago, whatever it might be. That's a guess. I think confidence is high. There's interdimensional beings. That's how they travel. I also think confidence is high that for some reason, nuclear power plants or nuclear weapons concerns them. I'm not sure why. Well, and the other thing, from my communication, from my perspective, it's not about us. We have nothing to do with it. Okay. It's about them. Totally about them. And whatever the reason they're here, it's to effect, whatever in the future with them, not us. It has nothing to do with us.
Yeah, and that's the terrifying thing about time travel, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if they come back in time to alter us, then they have to constantly do that. Otherwise, we don't exist, they don't exist. It's like this weird time loop.
Right, but it ties into a lot of things, even, as Ryan said. I mean, they come back for a purpose. But, let's say that all of our experiences all happened in their time in 2 days, the last 2 days.
Right.
You know what I mean? You don't know. You don't know how much time they're expelling on this. I do think that also that, people get confused out there. I think 99% of the UFO sightings are explainable. But the 1%, which is a huge number on sightings, are not. The other thing is, I think there's a huge, we're not going to go into it tonight, but there's a huge disinformation program going on.
Oh, yeah.
Being orchestrated by, number one, the United States, And most recently, the hearings in Washington, D.C. I mean, you can't get any more red flag type operations than that.
I agree.
They don't want you to know exactly what is going on, so they go ahead and they have created a talking points that we've carried on for 80 years, and that's my point of view on it. And all this is based on my contact. I think Lieutenant Commander Hoover once said, the biggest secrets about UFOs are not that they're aliens. It's that they're time travelers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this so much. And I think that if you were a time traveler, you just tell people that you're from Zeta Reticuli. You would just tell them, hey, actually, we're from
Why would they come here? Why would they want to do hide and seek? Okay. Hide and seek. No. That is not the objective. I mean, once in a while, these craft are seen. One of the other working theories we have, I'm not discounting people that have sightings and in contact like with grays and stuff like that. I'm not discounting that. One of the things that we have a working theory on is that they are not, as human beings, able to go ahead and do this type of travel. Okay, this interdimensional travel. It's just too harsh, corporeal on us. So they have created beings, robot type, humanoid type beings, maybe the Greys, who knows? And that is what are able to actually physically come back or interdimensionally travel in time. Or maybe other beings too, I don't know, that is our working theory on it. Just that the physics of it is just too harsh for human beings to do interdimensional travel.
It's so
I know I wanted to get that out because there's so many points that were being made, and it all sort of ties in for me together. So.
No, it absolutely does. If we're going to do one of these on disclosure, I will absolutely invite you back for that. And I'm grateful that you brought that point up. Okay, so we're probably going to wrap it up here in just a little bit, guys. I just want to first of all say thank you to everybody for participating, everybody listening and watching. We've got some wonderful folks in the chat that are just blown away by you guys, and I knew that they would be. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart for doing this, and you all for watching and listening. So if you don't mind, I would like for everybody to go and just let everyone know how they can find you, and then what your thoughts are on mass contact. So let's take this from the micro to the macro. Are we ever going to get mass contact? And this is also for you contactees. Have you ever asked, like, hey, why don't you guys just land? Like a huge, like Independence Day, bunch of craft everywhere, but just don't blow us up, kind of a thing, and just let everybody know what's going on here. So, Ryan, let's start with you, brother.
Yeah. So my book. So do I plug my book here? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Is
Plug it. I'm going to link all the ways to find
yeah.
you guys, but just in your own words.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my book's available on Amazon, published by Philip Mantle at Flying Disc Press, if anyone wants to check that out. And then I also have a YouTube channel, which is my name, Ryan Musgrave Evans, if people, and my email's there in the about section on that, if people want to say good day. There have been a few people related to, disclosure and mass sightings or whatever. There have been a fair few people, not a huge amount, but some who have read my book and watched my channel and have attempted to contact the same beings that I'm in touch with. Some people to dramatic effect already. Using a lot of devices that ghost hunters would normally use. So devices so that there's a vocabulary of words that can be picked. Also devices that are picking them up, detecting movement and things like that. So it seems as though they're prepared to break the rules and present themselves to us and even have interactions and discussions, provided they follow certain protocols. And these protocols are not revealing themselves and saying g'day as flesh and blood entities and then allowing you to remember it. Now, they do that to people sometimes, but the person would not, under normal circumstances, remember. Yeah, so there's already been some interesting interactions with people going on camping trips into wilderness areas, playing the Sierra Sounds, which are Mudgina. Not lots of people think the Sierra Sounds recorded by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry in the 70s were Bigfoot. They're definitely not Bigfoot. They're definitely Mudgina. I've heard them making all these sounds. Their native language sounds like a mixture of Japanese and Korean to our ears, but then they also mix in like deep resonated sounds, sort of talking like a samurai. And you know, samurai chat is sometimes what the Sierra Sounds are called. So they've been playing some of these sounds and then actually attempting to make contact and projecting welcoming thoughts and things like that, and actually having interactions of a kind. So that's very cool.
That is very cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
That is amazing, and thanks again for hanging out, man.
No,
Dr.
thank you,
Scott.
man. Thanks so much.
Oh, hell yeah, dude. Yeah, you're here. You're a part of this, and just everyone here. Again, I promised I wouldn't fanboy out on y'all until after this, but I will. Dr. Scott, if you don't mind, just tell us where you can be found and what your thoughts are on mass contact.
Well, I can be found at irenascott.com on the internet, and my books are listed. I have 4 published with Flying Disc Press. And my thoughts of contact are that maybe they've supplied us with the information that we just don't know how to understand it. Maybe they control the government. And it's government telling us they don't exist and things like that. So I don't know, actually.
That's fair. That's a great, I mean, it's an honest answer. I don't either. I'm just curious. That's why I'm looking to you guys. What do y'all think? Because I don't know. Denise Stoner.
Hi. Yes, I have the co-authored book with Kathleen Marden, The Alien Abduction Files. I can be reached at dmstoner1@gmail.com. And what do I think? I don't think we're ready for this mass introduction. I think we've got a ways to go before they decide to introduce themselves to us.
I think that's a fair assessment. Fair dinkum, as Ryan would say. Pam, what about you?
Well, I can be reached through my website, which is PamelaNance.com. At the bottom of the page, there is a link that will hook you up to my email if anyone's interested in communicating. But I do have information about my sort of my biography and the evidence that I've collected over the years in not only the paranormal realm, but also extraterrestrial. And some of my theories are on the website. So I encourage folks to check it out. I do have 2 upcoming publications. I'm co-authoring 2 books, one with William Henry called Ascension, and that will be published in December of 2022. And a co-author with Neil Gober, who is the founder of Portal to Ascension. And his book is called Sound, and that's coming out in February of 2023. So, and I'm also working on a draft book of an encounter that I had in 2015 on Chris Bledsoe's property. It was a 2-hour missing time event, and Kathleen has helped in reviewing some of that footage that was captured that evening. So that's kind of what's happening in the media and website realm. And as far as a mass sighting, I don't know if as a full planet Earth that we're all prepared for, you know, some race of beings to come down and announce themselves. But if you look at the number of people who have encounters daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, in a sense, we are having mass sightings, but they're just more individualized and with different entities coming from either different planetary systems or different dimensions. So I do think in a sense that mass sightings are going on. I just don't think that we're prepared for them to land on the White House lawn. You know, that would be kind of a different scenario.
Yeah, yeah. And if they do, I don't know that they'd be ours. I don't know it'd be something that we'd want to be a part of. Kathleen, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you can reach me at kathleen-marden.com. You can purchase autographed copies of my 6 books there. There are also several articles that you can read, and my bio is there, and the conferences that I'll be speaking at this year with clickable links to that. My latest book is Forbidden Knowledge, and they're also available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookstores, etc. In terms of contact, I've asked them, why don't you just show your craft over every major city in the world simultaneously? And they say that we would interpret that as an invasion, and that they wouldn't do that because it could have dire consequences. And they realize, I'm saying this now, they realize that humans are not ready for direct contact. And I agree with them. They are so different, at least the ones that I've interacted with, are so different than us in they're very intense. They're telepathic. They look different than us. Everything is different. So the impact that this technologically advanced society could have on Earthlings if they were to come here and interact with us openly could lead to the destruction of our social order. And we've seen this when we've gone to indigenous areas and invaded, and it did not have a good impact. And they realize that, and so do I.
Great point. I completely agree. Look what we do to things and species and people, our own people on our planet here. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. Jim Penniston, man, how can they find you, and what are your thoughts on mass contact?
Okay. I got you unmuted, don't I?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. Okay. Well, you can contact me by therendlesfromforestincident.com. That's an interactive blog I have, and of course, on Facebook about Rendlesham Forest. I think it's important to know that book there. They say, 702 pages.
702.
And of that 702, you'll find that each chapter has evidentiary endnotes that total more than 300 pages by themselves. So I figured everybody wanted to have the facts on that. Also, you'll have to pay for the book on Amazon.com, but you can get it free also on Amazon.com if you have like Prime or something like that. And I encourage somebody, to get it by, the ebook, and so at least so they can read it. That's the main point. Also, the other point is that all proceeds for that book go to charity. I've never collected anything on the Rendlesham Forest incident. I can't see making money on that, my encounter. So you can rest assured. I think this year I started out with St. Jude. I think in July it goes to Wounded Warrior. So keep that in mind when you're buying the book.
Yeah, and it's a phenomenal comprehensive breakdown. It's a wonderful book, and thank you.
Thank
Mark
you.
Gober, my man. Oh, Jim, mass contact. What are your thoughts? My apologies, guys.
Mass contact. Well, my site was my sighting was mass contact. I mean, we had 200 people. Does that constitute mass sighting?
It definitely does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
It was 200 people. So,
Well,
and it was all people that could actually know what they're looking at.
Right.
I mean, they know it wasn't, a Russian aircraft or a satellite or some stuff like that. We also included it goes in the book in a lot of detail, but there was that I know, there was 60 civilians on top of all that, so it's a huge mass sighting that took place. And then if it wasn't good enough, it came back 2 days later.
Yeah.
So
Okay. just in case.
Okay, just in case. But I don't think you're gonna have a mass sighting like in Washington D.C. I tell you what, you're never gonna see anything like that. I think the best. I don't even think you're gonna see this disclosure. Okay, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah.
People can wish for it, they can think about it. It's not going to happen for many of the reasons that like even Marlene or what's it, Kathleen was talking about. We're not prepared for, I guess, what it really is. I guess is a phenomena or what we think it is. So, and I think the other part is that government's so they're so uh, separated on stuff like the Navy, the Air Force, everything else, all these little entities. Um, they don't know what the left hand don't know what the right hand's doing. And I think that, and they have a ingenious, we talked about this at another show, but they have an ingenious way of making it non-accessible through Freedom of Information Acts and stuff like that. It's just brilliant how they do it. So, and those there are the facts.
Absolutely. And you were in the service, and thank you again for your service, man. I have a high reverence for folks that choose to do that. So thank you.
I really enjoyed it. Okay. I did. I always enjoy doing things for people.
Well, we're grateful. And you get an incredible story out of it as well. So thank you. And it is fascinating. And we will go down that rabbit hole on the next one for
okay.
Sure, brother.
Later.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Yeah. Mark Gober, man, cap us off, buddy. Tell us where we can find you and talk to us about mass contact. What do you think?
Sure. Well, Brandon, thanks again for having me back.
Thank you.
For those interested in learning more, you can see my website, markgober.com, markgober.com. And my 3 books are currently available on Amazon. The 4th one will be out later this month, June 2022, called An End to Upside Down Contact, UFOs, Aliens, and Spirits, and Why Their Ongoing Interaction with Human Civilization Matters. And also my podcast is called Where is My Mind, on many of the topics of consciousness that we talked about tonight. In terms of mass contact, I don't really know, but I think there have been some examples historically, depending on what people believe about those, the case reports, but like Fatima, Portugal in 1917, thousands of people apparently witnessed things. Different people saw different things, but that was a pretty big mass sighting. The Phoenix Lights is another example that comes to mind. So in some regard, we've had maybe mini mass sightings, but my view, just as an opinion, is that there is a process of evolution of consciousness that starts with each individual, and maybe contact will be in that manner as well. It's sort of a grassroots process where it starts with us. And as we each individually evolve, maybe we will see more contact broadly.
Could not agree more. I cannot thank you all for joining me on this. This has been a tremendous conversation. We could go on and on for this, but that's another thing. I'm going to be linking all of the ways these folks can contact y'all, reach out, further research your research, and get to know you guys a little bit better and get as excited about all of you as I am. So thanks again to everybody out there watching and listening, and thank you all my panelists. If you want to hang out afterwards for a little bit in the after party, we can do that, but I'm going to stop the live. I'm going to leave you guys with this final thing. Think about this week, guys. Until next time, you could be in a screen memory right now on a UFO, and you wouldn't even know it. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate it, guys.